Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle. I'm Len Edgerly. This is the show for February 16th, 2018. I am standing at one end of a large exhibition hall at the Denver Convention Center for the American Library Association Midwinter Meeting. This is the first time I've been to an ALA event, and I've learned some worthwhile aspects of what it means to be thinking about libraries' role in the future, and went to a session about VR and augmented reality in library settings, which I'll have more to share with you as well. And then also I did several interviews here on the floor of the exhibit hall about people just doing different aspects of what it takes to run a library successfully in 2018. I can't help but compare this exhibition space to South by Southwest, which I'll be headed down to Austin to attend next month in March. South by Southwest is just shoulder-to-shoulder energy and bustle and people talking faster than they talk here. You could say this is a much more civilized environment for people to share ideas and business proposals. South by Southwest is just kind of cranked up to 11 in terms of its vibe for a conference. And that's not surprising. That's the nature of that conference, and it's the reason I love it. But this conference is significant. I think there'll be 8,000 people will attend this based on the attendance last year. They have a bigger conference that will be coming up in the summer in New Orleans. I had a nice exchange with the media relations people for the conference. They said they weren't able to issue me press credentials, and it turned out they don't have any way to give credentials to a podcaster. So I and one other podcaster tried to get credentials for this conference, and the woman was gracious, a little apologetic, and said by the New Orleans conference there's probably going to be a track for people that are communicating about library issues in a podcast. So perhaps the Kindle Chronicles will be one of the first podcasts to get credentials. I'm not sure I'm going to be making the trip to New Orleans in the summer, but anyway, these are good settings because you've got people that love books, you've got people that are involved in technology, and I love libraries. I think the idea that libraries are going to find a way through this digital transition it's a pretty important aspect of what I've been concerned about and thinking about for 10 years here on the podcast. So who knows? Maybe I will be in New Orleans this summer. The exhibit hall is about to close, and I'll put the show together in Cambridge. We're heading back there for birthday parties for my father and my grandson. So sometime next week in Cambridge, I'll be bringing the show to you based on what I've recorded here Saturday, February 10th. I recorded that intro when I was back in Denver at the ALA, and this show is going to be about the ALA conference. I am actually in Concord, Massachusetts, not Cambridge, to record the show for you this Friday, and that's because we had a chance for my parents to do a trial week at a pretty wonderful independent living home in Concord that they've been investigating for the past several years, and now the time has come to actually see what it's like out here. So there's been a lot of family coming and going, and obviously this is a very difficult decision for anyone to make. My folks have lived in the same house in Cambridge for 45 years, so the idea of moving to such a radically different way to live is something that it's fairly stressful for all of us, but especially for my mom and dad, who are 90 and 88. Darlene and I have been staying in a guest suite at the facility, this being Concord. The name of the guest suite is the Walden. It's right next to the big dining room. I'll have to say that when I consider a move like this, the food is a pretty big draw at kind of a high-end independent living place. You order from the menu, and you have a great variety and tasty food, wonderful service, and it's a campus kind of set in the woods looking over a river, a very pleasant place. So that has cut into the time I have available to put the show together. I'm glad I did have some recording in Denver to put together for you. We'll go back now to the fairly short interviews that I did in the exhibit hall. First, we'll hear from Carmela Orsini of a company named Novel Effect.
It's a mobile app. We sing theme music and sound effects with kids' books as you read them out loud.
So does this all take place on the app, or can they be reading a physical book while they hear the fun
It's
stuff?
both. So we're using the technology of the application, but the experience is still centered around a parent reading a book with a child. So you need the physical book. You're reading the physical book. We do work with ebooks if you have the ebook version as well. But then the app just comes in and enhances it with theme music and sound effects. So you're still reading, you're still sharing the moment with your child, but they're just getting the technology built in without the technology being the focus.
How does the technology know what page you're on in the book?
So it's voice reactive technology. So we've developed it all. We've patented it all. So it's part of the beauty of the app. We need about 5 words to find where you are in the book, and then we chime in with the theme music and sound effects that matches where you are. So it's great for those kids who turn too fast and skip pages. You can just keep going. You don't have to go back. It's not like you're hitting play and having to keep up with it. It's great for teachers in classrooms because if they pause and ask, comprehension questions or discussion questions with the class, it's just going to hang out there until they're ready to keep going.
And so if I'm a teacher or a parent or grandparent, I've got my iPhone with the app running. I start it. I've probably selected the specific book.
Correct. You select the specific book, and then we can show you there.
Yeah.
You hit the read book button there. It's going to load the book itself. That's when you can be grabbing your book off the shelf.
Right.
And I don't know if this is going to record well or not. I don't know how that works. But so Harold and the Purple Crayon by Crockett Johnson.
Let's see. I'll get my lavalier close. Oh, yeah.
Oh, but I need to be reading.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I'll put mine here and you read. Let's see what happens. So here's the sound effect coming from a little speaker.
All right. So one evening, after thinking it over for some time, Harold decided to go for a walk in the moonlight. All right. So now we can just sit here. I'm going to pretend I'm asking you discussion questions. What do you think of the book so far? We're going to skip ahead to some of the action parts where it gets a little bit more exciting. All right. So he put a frightening dragon under the tree to guard the apples. It was a terribly frightening dragon.
That's the dragon, right?
That's the dragon, right? It even frightened Harold. He backed away. His hand holding the purple crayon shook. Suddenly he realized what was happening. But by then, Harold was over his head in an ocean. He came up thinking fast, and in no time he was climbing aboard a trim little boat. All right, now you have to read the book yourself to find out what happens to Harold and his boat.
You got my interest going now.
Right, I know. It really helps kids get engaged in the story. One of our co-founders worked in special education. That's her background. So she worked with visually impaired students who can't access the illustration. So this was a way that they always did to kind of engage students into the story time and bring them in.
It's kind of a brilliant integration of the paper technology and the digital.
Right. We don't want to replace that moment. We know how important it is to read aloud to children. This isn't like a TV show where you're hitting play and they check out. You're still engaging in that interaction. They're still hearing the story out loud. And then we just give them the more emotional and audio clues to help them give context to what's going on.
Would it also work for an older student reading the book aloud and triggering the effects?
Absolutely. My 8-year-old nephew can trigger the sound effects. He's learning to read. His favorite book's The Little Shop of Monsters because it's got all the gross monsters in it who make lots of fun sounds. But he's 8 years old and his voice can trigger it as he's learning to read, stumbling and learning. So it's really great for lots of age groups.
How many titles do you have available?
We have over 100 on the app right now. We add about 5 to 10 a week depending on the week and depending on how long the books are and how long it takes to make them. We vary it up, so we work with some independent authors who are trying to get their books out there. We look for bestsellers and fun new releases that are artistic and diverse and have a lot of interesting things going. But then we also have a lot of the classics. So Where the Wild Things Are, Dr. Seuss is heavily in the app. So we like to have a nice variety. We work with educators, librarians to see what books they want made. So we really try to make sure our library represents a lot of different things.
What does say if I want that Madeline book? What's it going to cost me?
Everything in the app is completely free. So we don't want any barrier to be between a child and a tool to help them learn to read and to help fall in love with reading, because that's really, we all love reading. That's what we want. Sorry if I
download the app.
You download the app.
You can have any of these. Of course, you've bought the book.
You have to get the book. So you can go to the library, get the book. If you have the book on your shelf at home already, it works with that. And then we do have a couple of free ebooks built into the app. Again, my fingers just have not worked. I think I need to wash my hands. So like Tale of Peter Rabbit, for example, we have a free ebook that's available for it. So public domain books that we can do that with, we have them in there. there.
So that would show up on the iPhone or
right.
the iPad.
It's going to show up here. So in that case, even if you don't have a book, you can still access and enjoy the experience even without the physical book. If you have a Kindle book or an iBook already, you don't have to purchase a new one to work with us. It'll work the same. You could just open up the book here in the app and then close out and go into the Kindle or iBook, whatever that you're reading it from, and it'll run in the background and you still get the experience.
Well, that's great because it's totally platform independent because it's relying on your voice.
Correct.
It doesn't care whether you're reading a print book or a Kindle book or an iBook or anything.
Yep, so there's the free ebook.
Huh.
So yeah.
Well, what's the business model? Who's paying for all this creativity?
I mean, we're giving you something for free. Why does it matter? No. So we're 2 years in, so we are a tech startup, so we're still kind of figuring out the business model, playing around with what we're interested in. We love partnering with publishers who may want to feature some of their new titles or revitalize some of their older ones, so that provides some of our revenue stream. We may one day, way down the line, do some very small minor ads, but we don't want to do that. We want to keep it educational and focused. So that's kind of and we own all of the tech, that voice technology, that's ours. So we are open to licensing it with other companies and partnerships there. So that's where we're focusing on, making sure we can pay the light bill. We're not putting that on educators or consumers.
If I were a librarian here at the show on behalf of my library, how would this translate into my world of running a public library? Two
library people that we've been talking to a lot. One, just public librarians who have children's programming. So they do story times regularly at the library. They may have summer reading programs. This is great for that because the kids in themselves, it's a free tool they can access to help them read at home with the summer reading, or librarians can use it with a Bluetooth speaker at their story times that they're doing every week.
If you got a big enough speaker, you
could fill a whole auditorium. Yeah. If you're at home and want to use, if you have surround sound, it can really be really immersive in your living room. The other academic librarians have been coming up to, and at their universities, if they have early childhood education majors and programs, this is a great tool for a college student trying to figure out how they can make an impact in their classrooms where they're learning. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Where do you go to get the music and the creative content of
So we create all of our soundscapes. We work with award-winning composers from the film and gaming industry. So they're really, really great at it. It's changed the way I look and hear things. I never paid attention to that stuff before. We actually went and saw a movie last night, and all I could pay attention to now is the sound effects in the background where they're coming from. So they're just really fascinating people who do a great job of creating music that supplements the story but doesn't overwhelm and replace it. And then you notice when we stopped and Harold and talked and the music was still going in the background, it wasn't distracting. It wasn't annoying because it was repeating. It was just really nice background music, and it's really designed to do that.
Well, in that kind of a juncture where you stop, it must be doing some kind of a loop so it's not getting ahead.
Correct.
But it's just subtle so you're not aware that it's...
Exactly. That's like the beauty. It's like just back there kind of magically, I'm just going to loop through this until you're ready to move on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then the story we read, you're actually getting some sound effects of a scary dragon or a car screeching to a halt or those kind of things.
And those have been really fun because sometimes we'll have a unique story and we'll be in office and who can do a good monkey noise? Who can do a good goblin noise? And it makes a fun day at work when you're figuring out the secret talents that everyone has around you.
How big a staff or workforce do you have?
We have about 10 people working for us right now. Yeah.
To start 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm always a little overwhelmed with the choices at an exhibit hall like the one at the ALA meeting, and I've come to make decisions based on the quality of the candy and the dishes that they have to lure people to come and get the pitch for whatever they're wanting to talk about. I'm particularly partial to Snickers bars, and I think this next group had a dish that included some Snickers bars. I couldn't tell from the description and the logo really what their business was at all. It turned out there was a Harvard connection, which was fun to have, and a discussion about storing books for perhaps decades or centuries. Interesting. Here's the story.
My name is Paul Knopf. I'm the chief architect of a company called GFA Technology, and what we do is we're the premier vendors for high-density storage. So libraries often have more books than they can actually pack in their normal shelves that you browse on. So what do they do with those? You would think that they just try to digitize them, but that's not true because of copyright. So what they do is...
How does copyright affect their decision to digitize?
Because they're not allowed to digitize the content because it's copyrighted. They have to pay for the digital copy, and they're not prepared to do that. It's not in the license when they buy the material.
Interesting. So even if they're just doing a digital copy for their own use, they would have to pay to do that under the terms that they bought the book.
It's would be a whole separate license.
Wow.
So what they do is they store all the books that are low circulation books. These are books that research people may want to look at once every several years. In off-site storage, high-density storage, warehouses like shelving that is 30 feet high, 100 feet long, and there's football fields of these shelvings. It's unbelievable when you see it. There's some universities that have 15 million volumes under one roof of this type of book. So what our company does is we manage those facilities for these libraries, this off-site storage. It's really fascinating.
So manage like the temperature of the building plus being able to find which book is on which shelf, or what do you...
Great question. So the whole premise behind our software is never lose a book. And that's what we're concerned about. Because if you misplace a book in football fields of shelves with over 15 million volumes, you will never find it. So other people design the facilities. They're typically kept 55 degrees. When the books come in, they get vacuumed. If there's little bugs or critters, they actually go into a freezer so that, all those things get eradicated before they get put in the stacks. But we're all about never losing a book. Put it in the right place, know where you put it, and be able to get it at any time, quickly and efficiently.
Ooh, whoop, that's all right. We're still there. We're still on. Now, your associate Kevin was saying that somehow this had a start at Harvard, my alma mater. Tell me that story.
That is correct. Harvard came up with what's called the high-density storage model. And it's basically, how do you pack the most books on a shelf as possible? And Harvard came up with a process to do this. And what we did with Harvard, and by the way, now we're exclusively licensed by Harvard to actually sell that model out into the marketplace. What we did is we computerized Harvard's model of high-density storage.
What do you mean computerized?
Our software takes the business process that they invented, and what our software does is it handles that business process from end to end.
I see.
So when a book comes in, we have what's called an accession process, where you take these books in, and you have to be very careful, because again, if you misplace a book, you'll never find it. So as books come into these facilities, they get scanned. That's called accession. Then someone else will verify that just to make sure that no book was missed, that everything is done accurately, and then they get put on the shelf until they're requested.
Do you sometimes go into a facility that has a lot of books stored off-site, pre-digital technology, and you actually have to go through and enter them by hand using this technology?
Well, all of these books have a barcode on them, and if they don't have a barcode, they have to be barcoded before they can come into our software.
I see. There must be millions of these books stored around the country and around the world.
Millions. Library of Congress has a huge facility. Harvard has their own huge facility. There's another facility that is a amalgamation between Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, and New York Public Library that have 15 million volumes under one roof. Major universities all around the country, from Texas to Florida, have these off-site storage facilities, and they run our software. It's called LAS, and the name of our company is Generation 5th Technology.
Generation 5th?
Yes.
Like 5th generation?
That's exactly right. Our software is...
and FGA was already taken by like a yogurt company or something?
I don't know.
Seems like an odd way to get your initials.
That's a good question. But, Generation 5th, because when this company was started, there was a lot of talk in the computer industry about fourth-generation software.
I see.
Software that's easy to write because it's English-like in its language. So our software is fifth generation. It goes even beyond that. That was the marketing idea behind the name.
Yeah. It seems like you would have a fascinating view of the future, as in like a century from now. Given the digital technology following Moore's Law, it's going to keep being twice as efficient, half as much cost. At some point, does it just not make any sense to go to the cost of preserving physical volumes of paper that nobody ever reads anymore because they can get it all digitally?
That is a great question. First of all, I hope that never truly happens, because then if we ever do lose power, we won't even have material to read anymore. But it's very possible that my children's children won't even know what a physical book is. Today I read through Kindle. I almost never read a physical book, but it's certainly not going to be in the next decade or two. But at some point, yes, I would imagine it will all be digitalized at some point in the future. But I also hope it never happens, because then we become so reliant on the technology. If the technology fails, all that human knowledge is lost forever. Whereas books don't go away.
Yeah, it's sort of like historical preservation in the city. You don't want the old buildings to all be torn down for new stuff. Because you never know what the value is going to be to future generations.
Yeah, same kind of thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very interesting.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Good
Thank you,
with
Len. Really appreciate it, sir.
If you heard last week's show, you know that my grandson James is a voracious reader, as is my father. So I was thinking of James when I had the following conversation, which was about an innovative way to provide some incentives for young readers of all ages actually, to find books that will be of interest and to have some motivation to read them.
I am Felix Lloyd, and I'm the co-founder of Beanstack, and we help libraries facilitate reading challenges for their patrons and community.
Now, reading challenge would be, say, summer reading for a student?
Exactly. Summer reading for a student or family, so all ages. A great example is a library that wants kids under 5 to do activities around talk, sing, read, write, and play. That's often a common theme for early literacy, while they want their 6 to 12-year-olds to read 10 books, and they want their teenagers to read 300 minutes. We're the platform where they can do all of that in one place.
So each member of the family would be reading a different book?
Reading different books and maybe tracking them different ways, all toward earning prizes at the library, and hopefully coming to the library more frequently and reading more frequently in general.
What kind of prizes can they win?
Depends on the library, man. They do such cool things. I mean, you see everything from these sort of altruistic prizes, for example, where the more everybody reads, the library would give a donation to a nonprofit. You'll see prizes where there's a raffle for an iPad. You'll see where everybody who signs up gets a free book. It runs the gamut. I think it's informed by the community, by the budget, and by what motivates people to read. I mean, fundamentally, that's the business we're in, is trying to motivate people to read more.
So I have a grandson who's just about to turn 12. He's an avid reader. He reads on a Kindle.
Oh, wonderful.
If he goes to the Cambridge Public Library, does Cambridge Public Library in Massachusetts
not
use
yet.
you?
Harvard is. Harvard Public Library does, yes.
Harvard, the college?
No, Harvard Public Library in Massachusetts.
Oh, Harvard, Mass.
Harvard, Mass.
Yeah, west of...
it's different than Cambridge World.
Yeah. Harvard, Mass is like farm country. It's really pretty.
They fooled me.
They did. Oh, well, it must have some kind of a connection.
Yeah, sure.
So you've got the library in Harvard, Mass.
Yes, and a few other good places in Mass as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So if my grandson who's 12 goes to the Harvard, Mass library, is he going to see Beanstack somewhere identified as the tool the library is using?
Likely. Even better if he sees sort of the library at first. You know, Beanstack is a tool toward an end, so hopefully what he'll see advertised is Winter Reading Challenge 2018. Read 10 books this year to start your year off right. And Beanstack will just be the destination for that. The goal won't be to sign up for Beanstack. The goal would be to participate in this reading challenge, and here's a cool tool where you can do that.
Now, when you have a reading challenge and it's something that a kid really wants, how are you sure they actually read the book?
You know, I think one of the cool things that libraries and even the schools that we work with now, there's a movement around what we call free choice reading. And I'm adopting a term I've learned from libraries, but it's the notion that kids reading anything their way is positive. And I think that falls within the notion of accountability for the reading. Our tool isn't an assessment tool. I think libraries accept that to some degree, maybe kids are not self-reporting correctly. Doesn't seem like a lot of instances of that. So I don't feel like libraries try to police it in the same way they would if it was a school setting and an English quiz. Some of them will use secret codes as a way to confirm understanding, or have you write reviews as a way to understand.
How would a secret code work?
A secret code works as you have to come to the event at the library or talk to a librarian and get the secret code, and only when you put in the secret code can you then get credit for the activity.
I see. Oh, because you attended the activity.
Or you came and got the code from a librarian by showing them the work you've done, or speaking with them in a way that showed knowledge.
So if my grandson comes in, is there kind of an interface where they find out that he's interested in this but not in this, and you're putting books in front of him that match his interests?
Exactly right. There's an opportunity to identify interests, favorite genre, age, reading level, and characters' backgrounds. I think 5 different measures where you can go in and say, this is my grandson, he's a growing reader, he's interested in ninjas, pirates, and warriors, diverse main characters, and STEM, science, technology, and math. And we like male characters and animal characters and mystery genre. And
this is something that a parent might fill out for their child?
Right, exactly.
Sometimes would you get the information directly from the child?
If the parents are open to that. So the way the platform works, parents and kids can log in under one account, or the parent can give the kids their own account. What we see is that ages 6 to 10, which participate the most, are primarily participating with their parents. Teenagers participate on their own, but not as frequently. So that 12 to 18 range, they're not as engaged typically. Then you get your 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, the parents of young kids, and they're very engaged. So it depends on the age, but typically a kid is participating with the parent.
From your viewpoint in running this company, are you optimistic that kids are still reading books the way your and my generation did, or do you see I'm
very optimistic. I'm a believer that there's a quote, I'm going to butcher it, but it goes something to the effect of, there's no kid that doesn't like to read. There's just a kid that hasn't found the right book. I feel like we're in that space. So I think when kids are I'm a former teacher, and I taught for a long time. And I think when kids are in the context of having to read something that may or may not be in their interest, they may not be great readers. But when they're reading for their enjoyment or reading to be part of their community, I think they're just as much readers as we've ever been. And there's so much good stuff out here now. Like when I was growing up, we were still reading good stuff, but Shakespeare, Tales of the Heart of Darkness in high school, all good things. But there's so many amazing books now designed for young adults. My son's 8 years old. He's obsessed with Percy Jackson right now. And we got him this little book light. And just getting that book light and being able to read in his room at night has made him just a voracious reader. And I think it's nothing to do with the times. I think he found a great book, and we embraced him reading it. And I get to see that every day with the libraries we work with.
Well, there is a lot more competition for attention. Video games at any age, TV and everything. How do you assess a book's ability to compete with things that are that flashy and that exciting?
I don't know that it can. I think there's a few things we do. So we have a mobile app, for example, that lets you scan the book number, time yourself reading, and then keep stats around reading. So in this way, we're still trying to make it about reading, but trying to gamify the experience a bit and bring the mobile device in.
Like a video game.
In a way. It's not. It's using
some
video
of the
game
same
principles,
tropes,
but it will never compete with a 3D shooter game or athletic game. So no, those things are shiny objects. I think when you have parenting in a community that also embraces reading and makes space for that. In my house, we try to keep the video games on this time and make time for other things. Then reading can compete in that way. But I'm
interested in how you do manage that. Do you have like a specific time of the day or the week when your son can do video games?
The weekends.
How constrained is it?
It's a couple hours a weekend.
So only 2 hours for a whole weekend, and the rest of the week it's all books or homework?
It's books. It's a lot of sports. It's a lot of taking them to basketball practice, soccer practice, baseball practice.
Getting outside.
We're fortunate in that way.
Yeah.
But I think he's 8 years old, and it's a work in progress. I think as kids get to be older, your grandson's age, they're going to push back more on that. I embrace video games as another way of literacy, and if a kid's interested in it, then it's something.
You don't worry that he's going to be sort of out of step with kids that are playing 6 or 8 hours of video games?
Not yet. Not at his age. And, not at all. As a former teacher, what I've seen is that, kids are just, they're kids. Like, they don't, they speak the same language without necessarily needing to have played the same 6 or 8 hours of a game. I feel like they're just part of a culture and community that if they're confident and comfortable, then they'll excel under most circumstances.
That's interesting. Yeah. It's sort of not related to the platforms they've grown up with. It's more like character and the essence of being a kid.
Yeah, I think so.
That's universal.
So. Yeah, I think so. But I'm not Pollyannish. I think being a kid is hard these days. And I think that we're part of a solution for many, but not all. And if we keep getting better at what we're doing, we'll be a solution for more and more over time. But there's always a larger puzzle at place.
Great. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Felix.
Thank you as well. Good meeting.
As I took a final tour through the exhibition hall, I spied someone halfway down an aisle who I recognized from afar. It was David Burleigh of OverDrive. That's the company that has the leading position in supplying digital content to libraries. I've seen David at different shows, BEA, Digital Book World, I think. He's a great ambassador for OverDrive because he's serious, he's informed, and kind of a tall guy, and I really enjoy the consistency with which he's presented OverDrive's mission, and always gives candid answers to questions. So that was a treat to see him there, and enjoyed talking with him.
My name is David Burleigh, Director of Marketing for OverDrive, the leading independent distributor and ebook reading platform for libraries and schools.
You're still the leading one. You've been the leading one for a number of years now.
We still
Anybody
are.
Breathing hot and heavy behind you?
Well, I think we are still the number one, serving 40,000 libraries and schools around the world.
That's amazing. Now, you're talking about Libby, which is an app I can download to my iPhone or Android device. What will I be able to do with it?
Libby is the fastest way to reading happiness. So you install it on your device, and you can get your library. You can find your library, first of all. You can get to the collection of that local library, and you can belong to multiple libraries that you either work or live in. And then you can also then enter your library card. If you don't have one, you can get an instant card in 12 markets that we're piloting right now. And then literally within about a minute, you can be reading. You can send it to your Kindle device or app, or you can read right there in the Libby app.
And in the Libby app, I find a book in my library. It's not on the wait list, so I can get it downloaded to my iPhone. So it's actually on the iPhone. It's not being read from the cloud.
Correct.
And
or an audiobook that you can stream, or you can download the audiobook.
Right.
Yep.
How robust is the app for reading compared with, say, the Kindle app on the iPhone, which I can highlight, I can do notes. The highlights and notes go up into a cloud. I can fetch them really easy.
Right. Right. It's all the same features. You can save the notes, bookmarks, and all that kind of thing. And the next time you check out that same book, you can get those back.
Is there any way to find them and print them out? Like if you're preparing an author interview and you want to see what portions of their book you highlighted and you want to actually have it printed?
I would say probably not.
Okay.
Probably not at this time.
Yeah, but you could go into the book itself.
Is prohibited from being printed.
Yes.
But that's a good question. That's the first time I've heard that, so I can find out if that's true.
Yeah, it's handy. On the Kindle side, if you go to read.amazon.com/notebook, for every book that you've highlighted, you'll see all of your notes and annotations, and then from a web page you can just print it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty sweet.
That I would venture to guess that they would probably operate the same way. I just don't want to confirm that that's true. But yeah, the notes could be separated out.
Right.
And then why not? Why not be able to print them if it's just a basic web page?
What other new things do you have to talk to folks here at the ALA Midwinter meeting?
Well, we're also talking about the discovery of ebooks. Since we're talking to libraries here, and it's all about the discovery to bring in new customers to the library. It's about a year ago we integrated with Google. So when you do a search for a book, in Google, you'll find the Wikipedia entry, you'll find the retail options, including Amazon, of course, and then there's the availability of borrowing it from your local library. You can tell where you are based on your IP address, and you can click right from that link to your local library or whatever the library is that you belong to or that's nearest to you, and go right to the title page in that library. And if it's available, you can borrow it, entering your library card, etc., just like the normal way.
Sweet. That's got to really help people find some books. Anything that reduces friction to get to something you might like is good.
Right. That's a big thing that we're talking about here is the discoverability in Google. Another big discovery feature or program that we have is called the Digital Bookmobile. We may have talked about that in the past. This is I think it's our 8th or 9th year that we've had it on the road. We've totally redesigned it so it's been refreshed. It's a little smaller footprint, but it goes around. We do a couple of hundred events at libraries and schools a year to raise awareness in the communities that libraries have digital books.
How would you describe the situation now versus 5 years ago, say, in terms of how many publishers are making it easy for libraries to get digital copies of the books to at reasonable cost and in reasonable numbers, just their access to what's out there? A lot better than it was 5 years ago?
Definitely. It's definitely a lot better. There's definitely lots of different access models and lending models that we've developed and partnered with publishers to make it a win-win for both the publisher and the writer and the author and the agent, as well as for the library and for the school. We're always advocating for the library to get the broadest, most liberal terms and the lowest prices that we can. It's a publisher decision on what titles they make available, how often, at what cost. There are some, and I don't know if your audience is familiar with, some publishers make their titles available sort of under a certain term where, the library purchases the title for lending, but then it would expire after 2 years or 52 checkouts, things like that. There's simultaneous use packages so that when you go to the library, the book's always available. It's like a subscription. It'll be always available for a period of 12 months. Or for another set
I
period.
see. And then if the library wanted to renew it, they'd buy another 12 months.
Right. So there's different ways, and then we just are introducing here at ALA Midwinter a new cost per checkout model, so that if a publisher wants to make all their books available in a certain format, the library can add those to their collection, and then it looks like it's available, but and that they purchase it, but when in fact the book is just there, and the library pays for it when the book is borrowed instead of paying for it in advance.
I see.
Just another flexible way to allow libraries to manage their budget, to make as many books available to the end users as possible so that they can see what they want. And then, because libraries sometimes do have to, they have limited budgets, they have to make a decision on what they're going to make available on their websites. And so this is one way to do that and make it available, whether you want to test it out with certain foreign language or certain sort of more obscure maybe subjects or genres. We have about 30 publishers currently in that program and thousands of titles that libraries can add to their collections.
Would a publisher have any interest in knowing how much of a book, how much of a library digital book someone had read as an indication that, hey, they really like the book, hey, maybe they'll tell their friends about it, maybe we'll get some sales out of it, that it sort of puts them back into that old model of the reason they made books available to libraries is it was good for selling books.
Right. But we've got lots of data. We've done lots of white papers. I presented last year at Book Expo on that very concept. So it's helping establish and reaffirm, really, libraries as a great place for discovery. There's Amazon does a great job. That's a great place to start looking for books. The libraries are as well. And from a consumer standpoint, it's free to see the book. We know that the library's websites get lots and lots of traffic, but really a fraction of the people actually end up borrowing the book, either on the waiting list or they didn't have a library card available or whatever. So there's a lot of exposure, visibility for the publishers and authors. So we're trying to build out the case and continue to reaffirm that message to the publishers and to the public in general, that that's a great place to go if you want to just try out a new author before you buy the book, try some new genres or test different. The libraries have everything, as they always have in print, and now they have increasingly great collections as well in digital.
From where you stand at OverDrive, seeing this whole sector, do you have any data that shows what % of library users are reading digitally versus reading on paper?
No, we don't have the data for the print side. We know generally the digital circulation could be anywhere from 10 to 20% or more of a library's circulation. So it really varies. Yeah, but that just shows sort of the demand is growing, and that's grown over the years.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, great. I hope you have a great show.
All right. Thank you, Len.
Yep.
Good to see you.
In addition to the exhibit hall, there were sessions, panel discussions at the ALA Midwinter meeting. I attended just one of them. We were getting ready to fly out here, so I just had the one day that I bought the day pass for. And it was titled Immersive and Interactive Virtual Reality in Academic and Medical Libraries. That might not seem like the most exciting title, but the words VR got me, virtual reality. I was curious just to see what kind of a presentation might be pitched to librarians about VR. The panel discussion was led off by Pete Schreiner, a libraries fellow at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. He captured the early adopters' excitement about VR, which I've certainly experienced, and also the long slog to get it into the hands of students in a way that helps them to understand the potential of it. Here is some of what he had to say in his presentation.
Tons of potential for VR, PTSD, exposure therapy, pain relief, simulation. Chris Milk has called VR the empathy machine. We see a lot of people have probably seen the New York Times series. I can tell you a story, I can show you a story on a 2D screen. What happens when I put you in that story? In 360 video-based, it's maybe just the agency the viewer has is only to look around in 360 degrees, dwell on the objects or scenes you want to look at. But that's a vast difference over just watching a regular 2D movie where the director has kind of prescribed everything that you're going to see. And why is this important? There are various projections. This one says by 2020 this is going to be a $40+ billion industry of hardware and software. That could vary. There are lots of projections like this. I think it's important for those concerned with keeping up with emerging technology, training the next generations of students who are going to be using this to solve our world's problems. It's important to jump on this now.
How you jump on it now, especially from the point of view of a library, has to do with design. And one of the most interesting speakers on this panel took a very organized approach to how do you set up a room in a library where some people can be trying VR in one space, there can be a projection of what someone is seeing in a VR headset in another. Very clever and very high-quality design that if you were really going to do something with VR in a library, you wouldn't just have some Gear VR headsets and some edge phones that people would be haphazardly trying. You'd want to organize it and then also organize the training. What I have found with VR since probably my first experimentation of it was a couple of years ago, and I've had a couple of the VR headsets, the Gear VR headsets from Samsung, there's always this initial excitement about, oh my gosh, you look through here, you can look around 360 degrees, you're in Fallujah, you're in some dramatic scene, and as he said, you are actually in the story. It's total immersion. But what I found is that any kind of sustained experience of it runs up against how the headset gets kind of sweaty, when I wear it, and then I do end up feeling nausea sometimes because it's so intense. The images aren't clear to my eyes yet. I don't know if that's just because of the way my eyes are spaced. So anything more than that first gee whiz moment ends up being tedious. And I realize I look over at the Gear VR on my counter at Denver, and I haven't picked it up for 3 months. And whenever I pick it up, there's new software updates, there's new material to check out, so I can tell that there's new content and new things being done. But I just don't have it in me to have a regular diet of this experience, which I'm very bullish on, as this speaker was and other speakers were at this panel. So I find it to be a fascinating inflection point in a technology that I really do believe is promising, but boy, getting there, it may just take a few more turns of the technology itself before these headsets are comfortable. They don't feel gross and sweaty, and it's just a more natural thing to try out. That's it for this week. I'm not sure who we'll be talking with next week. This is Len Edgerly in Concord, Massachusetts for the Kindle Chronicles. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen. Have a great day. Bye.